March 3rd, 1952, 2:17 a.m. Mickey Rosen woke up to the sound of trucks, heavy trucks, the kind that shouldn't be on a residential Brooklyn street at 2 in the morning. He looked out his apartment window above his bookmaking shop on Saratoga Avenue and saw 6 cement mixers idling in front of his storefront. Men in work clothes were already breaking his front door down. By the time Mickey got downstairs, it was too late. The concrete was already pouring through his windows, through his door, flooding his operation like gray lava. His betting slips, his phones, And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Cash counting tables, everything disappearing under 3 feet of wet cement that would set hard as stone by sunrise. Mickey stood on the sidewalk in his pajamas, watching his livelihood being buried alive, and he knew exactly why this was happening. 4 days ago, he'd made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd tapped into Anastasia's private phone lines. To understand why this was a death sentence mistake, you need to understand how the bookmaking business worked in 1952 Brooklyn. The mob didn't just protect bookies, they provided infrastructure, communication networks. The lifeblood of the gambling operation was information, horse racing results, last-minute odds changes, scratch notifications. All of this traveled through dedicated phone lines that the mob controlled. These weren't regular phone lines. They were private circuits installed and maintained by technicians on the mob payroll, running through buildings the mob owned, terminating at switchboards the mob operated. If you were a bookie in Brooklyn, you paid the Anastasia crew for access to these lines. It was the cost of doing business, like rent or electricity. The standard rate was $500 a month per line. Most bookies had 2, maybe 3 lines. Mickey Rosen had been paying his $1,500 monthly fee for 3 lines since 1949, and business was good. He was clearing $3,000 a week on bets, paying his tribute to the Anastasia crew, keeping his head down, following the rules. But Mickey had gotten greedy. In February 1952, he'd been approached by a telephone company technician named Lou Berkowitz. Lou had been installing some legitimate phone lines in a building on Kingston Avenue when he discovered something interesting. The building's basement housed a junction box for Anastasia's private betting lines, and Lou, who liked to gamble and didn't like to pay, had an idea. "I can splice you into the system," Lou told Mickey over coffee at Dubro's cafeteria. "You'll have access to all the lines, all the information, same as the big boys. But you won't show up on any of the connection logs. As far as Anastasia's people know, you're still just running your 3 paid lines." Mickey should have said no. Everyone knew Anastasia wasn't someone you stole from. Anastasia ran Murder Incorporated in the 1930s. He'd personally killed more men than most people had met. He controlled the Brooklyn waterfront, the bookmaking operations, the loan sharking. He was called the Mad Hatter because of his explosive temper and the bodies that tended to pile up when he got angry. But Mickey did the math. 6 extra lines without paying for them meant $3,000 a month in his pocket, $36,000 a year. That was real money, life-changing money, and Lou made it sound so simple, so safe. "They'll never know," Lou promised. "The lines are coded. There's hundreds of connections running through that junction box. Your extra taps will just look like normal And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Traffic. I've done this before. Trust me. On February 27, 1952, Lou Berkowitz spliced Mickey Rosen into 6 additional lines from Anastasia's private network. For 4 days, Mickey thought he'd gotten away with it. For 4 days, he was receiving premium racing information on 9 lines while only paying for 3. For 4 days, he was stealing from Anastasia. Then came the cement trucks. What Mickey Rosen didn't know, what Lou Berkowitz didn't know, was that Anastasia's organization had been dealing with phone line theft for years, and they'd developed a system to catch it. Tony Spring Romero was Anastasia's telecommunications chief. Before the war, Tony had worked for AT&T as a line supervisor. He understood phone systems better than anyone in the New York underworld. When Anastasia decided to build his private betting network in 1947, he'd hired Tony to design and maintain it. Tony's job wasn't just keeping the lines running, it was keeping them secure, and Tony was very good at his job. Every Monday morning, Tony ran diagnostics on the entire network. He had equipment, oscilloscopes, signal meters, line testers, gear that could detect the slightest anomaly in the system. He measured signal strength on every line, checked for voltage drops, monitored for interference patterns that might indicate unauthorized taps. On Monday, March 3, 1952, at 9 a.m., Tony was in the Network Operations Center, a converted warehouse in Red Hook that housed all the switching equipment for Anastasia's betting lines. He was running his usual diagnostic sweep when he noticed something odd. 6 lines running through the Kingston Avenue junction box were showing slight voltage irregularities. Not much, just a 3% drop, but in a properly maintained system, there shouldn't be any drop at all. Tony isolated the lines and ran a more detailed analysis. The voltage drop pattern was consistent with a splice tap. Someone had physically connected into the lines at the junction box, adding resistance to the circuit. It was amateur work, barely detectable, but Tony wasn't an amateur. He pulled up the connection logs for those 6 lines. According to the records, they were authorized lines, paid subscriptions running to legitimate Bookie operations in Flatbush and Borough Park. But the voltage signatures didn't match. The drop indicated an additional connection point that wasn't in the official routing. Tony picked up the phone and called Anastasia's office at the Riviera Democratic Club on Union Street. "Mr. A, we got a problem. Someone's stealing phone service." 30 minutes later, Tony was sitting across from Albert Anastasia in his private office. Anastasia was 49 years old in 1952, a stocky man with cold eyes and a reputation for sudden violence. He listened as Tony explained the technical details of the tap. "How much are they stealing?" Anastasia asked. 6 lines. That's $3,000 a month we're not collecting." "Do we know who?" Tony nodded. "I traced the splice point. It's routing to a location on Saratoga Avenue. There's only one bookie operating out of that address, Mickey Rosen." Anastasia was silent for a moment. Everyone in the room knew what was coming. "You didn't steal from Albert Anastasia and walk away." The question wasn't whether Mickey would be punished, it was how severe that punishment would be. "Is he paid up on his legitimate lines?" Anastasia asked. Tony checked his records. "Yeah, he's current. Been paying his $1,500 monthly fee on time since '49. Never missed a payment." This made it worse, not better. Mickey wasn't some desperate bookie trying to survive. He was a successful operator who decided to steal despite being able to afford the fees. It was disrespect. It was greed. And in Anastasia's world, both were unforgivable. "Who did the splice work?" Anastasia asked. "Had to be someone who knows systems," Tony said. "The tap is pretty clean. My guess, phone company technician, probably someone moonlighting for extra cash." Anastasia stood up and walked to his office window. Outside, Brooklyn was going about its business, people who thought they lived in a legitimate world, not realizing that underneath the surface there were rules, ancient rules about respect and consequences. "Here's what we're going to do," Anastasia said, turning back to face Tony. "I want you to find out who did the technical work. When you find him, call me. As for Mickey Rosen's operation, I want it shut down in a way that sends a message. I want every bookie in Brooklyn to hear about this and understand what happens when you steal from me." Tony Spring knew exactly what that meant. "I'll make some calls." That afternoon, Tony started tracing Lou Berkowitz. Phone company employee records showed Lou had been working in the Kingston Avenue area in late February. A few quiet conversations with union contacts confirmed Lou had a gambling problem and a history of doing side work for cash. By 6 p.m., Tony had Lou's home address in Canarsie and his work schedule. By 8 p.m., 2 of Anastasia's men were parked outside Lou's apartment. By midnight, Lou Berkowitz was sitting in a basement in Red Hook, explaining to very unsympathetic listeners exactly how he'd spliced Mickey Rosen into the phone network. Lou wasn't tortured. He didn't need to be. The moment he saw whose basement he was in, he told them everything. Albert Anastasia believed in proportional response, but his definition of proportional was not the same as most people's. If you disrespected him in private, he might let it slide with a warning. If you disrespected him in public, he'd kill you. But if you stole from him, if you thought you could take what was his and he wouldn't notice, the punishment needed to be public, creative, and permanent. The cement idea came from Anastasia himself. On March 2nd, he called a meeting with his top crew leaders at the Riviera Democratic Club. These were the men who controlled different rackets in Brooklyn. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Making, loan sharking, labor racketeering, waterfront theft. They gathered in Anastasia's private back room, 8 men who between them probably accounted for 50 murders. "We have a teaching opportunity," Anastasia began. "Mickey Rosen on Saratoga Avenue has been stealing phone service, 6 lines for 4 days. Tony Spring caught it during routine diagnostics." The men around the table understood immediately. Phone line theft was a violation everyone needed to see punished. If word got out that you could tap Anastasia's lines without consequences, every small-time bookie would try it. "I want his operation eliminated," Anastasia continued. "But I don't want him killed. I want something more lasting. I want every bookie in Brooklyn to see what happens to thieves and remember it every time they pick up their phone." That's when Anthony "Tough Tony" Anastasia, Albert's brother who controlled the Longshoremen's Union, suggested the cement. Tony Anastasia had access to cement trucks through his waterfront connections. The union controlled which companies got contracts to pour foundations for dock construction. He could have 6 cement mixers and a crew of workers on any street in Brooklyn within 2 hours. "We fill his shop with concrete," Tony Anastasia said. "Not just wreck it, fill it, floor to ceiling. Make it impossible to ever operate out of that location again. It'll cost him months of lost business, tens of thousands to repair, and everyone will know why it happened." Albert smiled. It was perfect, dramatic, expensive, and impossible to misinterpret. The message would be clear. Steal from Anastasia's phone lines, and your business gets buried alive. The operation was planned with military precision. Tony Spring confirmed Mickey Rosen lived in an apartment above his shop, so they'd need to move fast once they started to prevent him from interfering. They'd hit at 2 a.m. when the street was empty. 6 cement trucks would arrive simultaneously, workers would break the doors and windows, and they'd pump in enough concrete to fill the entire ground floor retail space, approximately 200 square feet. The cement company was told it was an emergency overnight foundation pour for a waterfront project. They didn't ask questions. When the mob called with union jobs, you showed up and did the work. The workers were told they were filling an abandoned building that was being demolished anyway. Again, no questions. On March 3rd at 1:45 a.m., the convoy assembled 3 blocks away from Mickey's shop. 6 cement mixers, a sledgehammer crew, and 2 cars full of Anastasia's men to supervise and make sure no one interfered. At 2:15 a.m., they rolled onto Saratoga Avenue. The sledgehammer crew hit the front door first, then the side windows. Before Mickey could even get downstairs, the concrete was already flowing. The workers moved with practiced efficiency, directing the thick gray mixture through every opening, filling the space like they were pouring a foundation, which, in a dark way, they were. The foundation of Albert Anastasia's reputation. Mickey appeared in his pajamas just as the second truck started pouring. He tried to run inside, to save his betting slips, his cash, something, anything. 2 of Anastasia's men grabbed him and held him on the sidewalk. "You don't touch nothing," one of them said quietly. "You stand here and watch. Consider yourself lucky you're watching instead of being inside." For 45 minutes, Mickey Rosen stood on the street in the cold March night, watching his business being entombed in concrete. The trucks poured and poured, the gray mixture rising inside his shop like floodwater, covering his betting boards, his telephones, his counting table, his safe. Everything. By 3 a.m., it was done. The shop was filled with approximately 180 cubic yards of concrete, roughly 48,000 pounds of cement that would set rock hard within hours. The trucks drove away, the workers left. Anastasia's men got in their cars. One of them stopped next to Mickey before leaving. "Mr. Anastasia wants you to know this is for the phone lines. He also wants you to know you're still in business. You can set up somewhere else, you can keep taking bets, but you pay for your lines like everyone else. You understand?" Mickey nodded, unable to speak. "And one more thing. Lou Berkowitz won't be doing any more phone work. You're on your own finding a new location." The car drove away, leaving Mickey standing in front of what used to be his bookmaking shop, now a solid block of concrete that would take weeks and thousands of dollars to remove. By noon on March 3rd, every bookie in Brooklyn knew what happened to Mickey Rosen. By that evening, the story had spread to Manhattan, the Bronx, Queens. By the end of the week, bookies in Newark, Philadelphia, and Boston had heard about the cement trucks. The story grew with each telling, as these stories always did. Some versions said Anastasia filled Mickey's shop with concrete while Mickey was still inside, which wasn't true but added to the fear factor. Other versions claimed Mickey had stolen from 50 phone lines instead of 6. The details varied, but the message was consistent. You don't steal from Albert Anastasia's phone network. What made the story especially effective was its visibility. Mickey's shop sat on a busy street. For weeks, people walked past the building and saw the concrete through the windows. They saw Mickey's attempts to jackhammer through it, a futile effort that barely made a dent. They saw the out of business. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. A sign he eventually hung on the door. The shop remained filled with concrete for 2 months. Mickey couldn't afford the removal costs, estimated at $15,000. He couldn't afford to rent a new location while simultaneously paying to fix the old one. His bookmaking operation, which had been clearing $3,000 a week, collapsed completely. In May 1952, Mickey finally arranged a meeting with Albert Anastasia through intermediaries. He came to the Riviera Democratic Club prepared to beg. He brought his account books showing his business was destroyed. He brought letters from his wife about their financial situation. He came ready to plead for mercy. Anastasia heard him out, then made an offer. I'll pay to have the concrete removed. I'll even help you get set up in a new location. But you work for me, now. You pay me 30% of your weekly take in addition to the phone line fees. That's the price for stealing and the price for mercy. Mickey had no choice. He agreed. Within 2 weeks, the concrete was professionally removed from his old shop, though the space was so damaged it was never usable again. Anastasia's crew helped Mickey find a new storefront on Blake Avenue. By June, Mickey was back in business, but now as a controlled operator, essentially an employee of the Anastasia organization rather than an independent bookie. As for Lou Berkowitz, the phone technician who'd done the splice work, he disappeared from Brooklyn in early March 1952. According to his family, he took a job with a telephone company in Ohio. According to people who knew the truth, his body was never found. Anastasia had made an example of Mickey's business, but Lou's punishment was more traditional. The cement incident became legendary in Brooklyn's underworld, a cautionary tale told for decades. Represented something important about how Albert Anastasia operated. He could have simply killed Mickey Rosen. It would have been easier, cheaper, and more permanent. But Anastasia understood that a dead bookie was quickly forgotten. A shop filled with concrete, that was a monument to consequences. Tony Spring, the telecommunications chief who discovered the theft, earned a reputation as the man who protected Anastasia's phone network. After the Mickey Rosen incident, attempted phone line thefts in Brooklyn dropped to 0. Nobody wanted their business turned into a concrete tomb. The story also reinforced something everyone already knew, but occasionally forgot. Albert Anastasia noticed everything. He had systems, procedures, people like Tony Spring who monitored his operations with professional precision. The idea that you could steal from him, even in small technical ways that seemed invisible, was a fantasy. He always found out. Mickey Rosen continued operating as a bookie, under Anastasia's control until 1957, when Anastasia was assassinated in the barbershop of the Park Sheraton Hotel. After Anastasia's death, Mickey briefly thought about going independent again, but the new bosses who took over Anastasia's operations had heard the cement story. They kept Mickey on the same terms, 30% of the take, plus phone line fees. Mickey died in 1973, still running a small bookmaking operation in Brooklyn, still paying his percentages, still telling anyone who'd listen about the night the cement trucks came. He never tried to steal phone service again. The building on Saratoga Avenue, where Mickey's original shop had been, was eventually demolished in the 1990s. And if you like this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. 1960s. But for years, that address was known in Brooklyn's bookmaking community as the Cement Shop, a reminder of what happened when you thought you were smarter than Albert Anastasia. The lesson wasn't subtle. It wasn't meant to be. In the world of organized crime in 1950s New York, respect was maintained through examples. And Albert Anastasia's example of Mickey Rosen's concrete-filled shop was one of the most effective examples ever made, not because it was the most violent, but because it was permanent, visible, and impossible to misunderstand. You could pay for your phone lines like everyone else, or you could watch your business get buried alive. Those were the only two options. And after March 3, 1952, every bookie in New York knew exactly which option to choose.